bear down, fam. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is one 7th round pick away from becoming a Bear, and in a minute, I'll tell you why Kansas City is basically giving him away right when ESPN just tagged Chicago with the 2nd worst pressure rate in the entire league. This move could be the piece Ryan Poles needs to finally protect Caleb Williams' blindside, or the exact same mistake they made a year ago with another ex-first rounder who ended up logging just 111 snaps at Halas Hall. Meanwhile, there's a quiet war brewing in the receiver room. Romo Dunza and Luther Burden III are going head-to-head for the year 1 job, and ESPN already put both of them on the list of Bears with the most on the line this summer, but only one of them is carrying a foot fracture. Nobody's sure is fully healed. And we're closing with the bombshell nobody in the Windy City saw coming. Chicago paid Kyler Gordon $40 million. He played 3 games, and the front office just dropped another $40 million on the secondary like that investment never happened. Let's get into it right now. Monsters of the Midway. Let us start with the story that actually matters, because this is not just another offseason blurb. This is the continuation of a problem this organization has been dragging around, and I mean that literally, for more than a year now. To understand it properly, we need to rewind. The Bears' defense in 2025 was honestly a study in contrasts. Ben Johnson showed up and the offense took off almost immediately. But on the other side of the ball, Dennis Allen had to work with the tools he was given, and those tools were not enough. Chicago finished with the 2nd worst pass rush win rate in the entire league, according to ESPN. Not the worst, the 2nd worst. And when you cannot pressure the quarterback consistently, you survive a different way, by stealing the football. The Bears lived off takeaways for almost the whole season, and that is a style that works right up until it does not, because it depends on luck just as much as talent. And here's the part that genuinely frustrates me as someone who analyzes this team closely. This is not new. Back in May of last year, when we were breaking down the 2025 free agency period, we were already saying that Ryan Poles had publicly stated he wanted to add help on the edge, and he did not do it. Not in free agency, not in the draft. The Bears had a direct line to Cameron Jordan through Dennis Allen's relationship with him, and they stayed put. Max Crosby slipped through their fingers, a name they never seriously chased, and the whole time, they kept saying the edge was the priority. That phrase, front office priority, sounds like a punchline to me at this point, honestly, because this offseason something similar happened again, just with a different twist. Poles did spend money on the defensive line, but he spent it on the inside, not the outside. They signed Neville Gallimore to a 2-year, $12 million deal, signed Kentavious Street and James Lynch to 1-year deals each, and used their final draft pick on Jordan Vandenberg, another interior tackle. 4 additions to the defensive line. 0 of them play on the outside edge, which is exactly where the hole is. And I want to pause here for a second because this matters. I am not saying reinforcing the interior line was a mistake. Grady Jarrett was hurt for most of the season, and Gervon Dexter needed real quality next to him. That problem was real, and they solved it well. But while they were fixing one problem, the problem they have been naming out loud for 2 straight off seasons stayed exactly the same. Right now, according to Mike Clay's projections at ESPN, Montez Sweat and Austin Booker are the projected starters on the edge. Sweat remains a reliable force. I say that with full seriousness, and his peers and executives around the league back that up constantly, even though a portion of the fan base still doubts him. Booker, for his part, closed out last season playing his best football in the biggest games, and that earned him an extended runway to prove he can be a real piece of the plan. Behind them, the depth is still a question mark. Dayo Odeyingbo, who carries a $48 million contract, had his 2025 season cut in half by a torn Achilles, so the real question for 2026 is not whether he underperformed, it is whether he comes back fully healthy. Jonathan Garvin and Jamri Chroma round out the rest of the interior roster, and while Shamar Turner, Dexter, or Odeyingbo himself can occasionally flex out to the edge in certain packages, that is not a plan. That is a hope, and here is where the news we actually need to talk about comes in. Bleacher Report, through analyst Mo Moten, proposed a trade where the Bears would send the Chiefs a late 7th round pick in the 2027 draft in exchange for defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Let us talk about who this player is with the seriousness he deserves, because there is a lot of context behind the name. Anudike-Uzomah was selected in the 1st round of the 2023 draft, pick number 31, by Kansas City after a dominant college career at Kansas State where he was named the Big 12's top defensive player. That is the kind of resume that creates big expectations, but the reality of his career so far has been a lot more modest. Through 34 career games, he has 41 total tackles, 19 pressures, and only 3 sacks. And to round out the picture, he missed the entire 2025 season with a hamstring injury suffered in the preseason. The Chiefs, meanwhile, kept investing on the edge in other ways, committing real money to George Karlaftis and using a 2nd round pick in the 2026 draft on R. Mason Thomas. There is one more detail that confirms this even further. Kansas City already declined his 5th-year option worth $14.5 million. The reading here could not be clearer. Kansas City is ready to let him go. Look, I will be honest with you, the low-risk, high-reward risk-reward logic here is undeniable. Anudike Uzoma is only 24 years old, his 2026 cap hit sits under $4 million, so the salary cost would be minimal, and a late 7th round pick is realistically almost nothing. If it works, the Bears got a former first rounder with real physical upside for the price of a lottery ticket. If it does not work, they lost a pick that was probably going to be a practice squad player anyway. But, and here's my genuine doubt, this exact kind of move has burned me before with first round names who never quite take off, and this is not an abstract worry. The Bears already tried this exact play a year ago. At the 2025 trade deadline, they gave Cleveland a 6th round pick for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, another cheap former first rounder looking for a change of scenery. It did not work. Tryon-Shoyinka played just 111 defensive snaps across 8 games with the Bears. 3 sacks in 34 career games is not a small sample either. I could be wrong, and honestly I hope I am, but betting on a change of scenery unlocking him already failed once with this exact organization running this exact formula. And to be fair to the other side of this debate, SICOM published its own piece this week arguing this specific trade would not fix anything, because Chicago's edge rush problem is big enough that a rotational piece like Anudike Uzoma simply does not move the needle far enough. And here's the comparison that really stands out to me. Look at how Kansas City handled this exact situation. They identified that Anudike Uzoma no longer fits their plan, invested elsewhere on the roster, and are now willing to move him for next to nothing just to free up space and resources. That is a cold, calculated decision with zero sentimentality attached. Meanwhile, the Bears have spent 2 entire years quote-unquote expressing interest in solving this same problem without ever executing one cold, calculated decision like that. That contrast tells me everything I need to know about the organizational gap between these two teams right now. And as if that was not enough, there is still another name floating around, Jadeveon Clowney. Tyler Dragon of USA Today flagged him as an ideal fit for Chicago inside his list of the best landing spots for free agents still available in mid-July. Clowney is 33, still unsigned, and over his last 3 seasons he has produced at least 5.5 sacks and 41 tackles every single year. For a player his age, that is a solid floor. What is interesting about Bleacher Nation's argument for Clowney is that they are not asking for him to start. Sweat and Booker would remain starters even if Chicago signed him. What Clowney would bring is real depth, the kind of player who lets those two rest without the collective level dropping off, and honestly, that kind of high floor is exactly what this roster is missing right now. But here's the detail that stands out most to me, and it connects directly to everything we just covered. This is not the first time Clowney and the Bears have been linked. We talked about it back in 2023. We talked about it again in May of 2025, when Poles publicly admitted he needed edge help and then did nothing about it in that year's draft. And now, in July of 2026, we are right back at the exact same point. Same player, same analysis, same need, and probably, if history is any guide, the same outcome. If you ask me what I think happens here, I will tell you the truth. I do not trust the Bears to execute either move, and that distrust does not come from nowhere. It comes from a documented pattern across 2 straight off seasons. Ryan Poles has shown he can identify the problem. He says it publicly, the media recognizes it, we recognize it. What he has not shown yet is that he is willing to solve it with the same decisiveness he used to solve the interior line problem. Now, if these 2 conditions happen, my read changes. First, if Kansas City truly wants Anudike Uzoma off the books before the regular season starts, the price of a late 2027 pick is so low it would be almost negligent not to jump on it. Second, if the free agent market for Clowney cools off over the next few weeks and his price drops even further, that is when I see Poles moving, because the financial risk basically disappears in that scenario. But if neither of those conditions happens, fam, we are going to be in the exact same spot in October, talking about the trade deadline, talking about Odingbo's 1 sack, and asking ourselves again why the front office did not act when it had the chance. Okay, put that frustration away for a second, because we need to talk about something that genuinely excites me, and funnily enough, it also comes from a decision the organization has not made yet. Let us get into something that, as a fan, excites me a lot more than any edge rush trade, even if that sounds strange to say out loud. Because what is happening in the Bears receiver room right now is honestly one of the best signs of organizational health I have seen in years. Odunze arrived with the 9th overall pick in the 2024 draft, carrying huge expectations. His rookie year was solid without being explosive, but 2025 looked like it was going to be his true breakout season. He showed up to camp shredding coverage in August, was clearly Caleb Williams' #1 receiver, and everything pointed toward a 1,000-yard year. Then his foot broke, a stress fracture that cost him several games and completely changed the trajectory of his entire season. Even so, his numbers ended up better than most people remember. Playing just 12 regular season games, he finished as Caleb Williams' most targeted receiver with 90 targets, tied for the team lead with 6 touchdowns, and 3rd on the team in yards with 661. Those are DAR1 numbers compressed into less than half a season. The problem is, the injury did not let him show it with any consistency, and that leaves open questions that only training camp can answer. Odunze himself has talked about what he calls his new normal in the foot. It is not that he feels constant pain, as he explained it himself, but the way the bone healed created internal calluses that slightly changed the structure of the foot. Tactically, that is the real question of this training camp. Can Odunze go back to being the explosive, contested catch receiver he was before the injury, or will the foot limit him in subtle ways that only show up under real contact? I will be honest, I do not have the answer, and anyone who gives you one with total confidence is probably making it up. This is a bone injury, not a muscle injury, and those tend to be a lot less predictable than people assume. This is where Luther Burden III enters the picture, selected in the second round of the 2025 draft. While Odunze battled the injury, Burden quietly built his own case. He finished his rookie season as the team's third leading receiver with 47 catches, fourth in yards with 652 plus 2 touchdowns all across 15 games played. Those numbers are not screaming superstar just yet, but the context matters. He is a rookie, playing in a brand new offense, competing for targets against an Odunze who was clearly the #1 priority whenever he was healthy. And now that DJ Moore was traded to Buffalo this offseason, the targets he left behind are completely wide open. ESPN's Courtney Cronin explicitly named Odunze as one of the Bears players with the most at stake this summer, and in that same piece she pointed to Burden as the direct rival also, quote, eyeing the distinction of the team's top wideout. That is not a coincidence or filler commentary. That is a reporter with direct access to the building telling us this competition is real and that the organization is watching it closely. Look, this feels like the best kind of problem a team can have. This is not a competition over who is worse. This is a competition over who earns the bigger role in an offense that already proved it can be explosive. If Odunze comes back healthy and explosive, Chicago has two genuine WR1 level threats competing for the same job, which forces opposing defenses into impossible decisions about who to bracket. And if Odunze is not quite at 100% when the season starts, Burden already proved during his rookie year that he can sustain real production without needing anything handed to him. There is a financial layer worth mentioning briefly here too. Chicago has an enormous amount of talent stacked up between receivers and tight ends, and at some point, once Caleb Williams signs his big second contract, it will be mathematically impossible to pay everybody. That decision is still far off, but this training camp battle between Odunze and Burden is, at its core, the first chapter of that future conversation. If I have to make a conditional prediction here, it goes like this. If Odunze's foot responds well through the first live contact periods of camp, and he keeps the same explosiveness after the catch that he had before the injury, he keeps the WR1 role without much of a debate. But if Burden keeps up the production pace he showed in the back half of his rookie year, this conversation over who is the guy is going to stretch all the way into week 1 of the regular season, and honestly, fam, that healthy tension is exactly what I want to see from this offense. Okay, now let us talk about something that worries me a lot more, because this next one is not a healthy competition. This is a financial pattern starting to repeat itself in the secondary. To close things out, I want to talk about something I have been chewing on for a while, and it finally clicked into place with this week's news. The Bears secondary is turning into a case study on financial investment versus actual availability. Let us start with Kyler Gordon. Back in April of 2025, Chicago handed him a 3-year, $40 million extension with $31.25 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid slot cornerback in the entire league at an average of $13.3 million a year. It was a big bet, and at the time it made sense. Gordon was coming off a productive, reliable stretch of football, but 2025 was, without exaggeration, a health disaster. Gordon played just 3 games all season. 3. He landed on injured reserve twice for soft tissue problems in his lower leg, hamstring, calf, and groin, and as if that were not enough, those same issues carried over into the spring of 2026, to the point where he was not with the team during May workouts. Ben Johnson did not hide his frustration. Back in December, when Gordon landed on injured reserve for the second time, the coach said, and this is a direct quote, that he wished he had a better feel for the individual, but with him being out as much as he has, he had not really gotten to see him competing or get to know him the way he would like. And in the spring, Johnson was even more direct, talking about how trust is a huge factor for this team, for this coaching staff, for the locker room, and that trust only gets built by being available. That word, trust, coming from the head coach himself about a player the organization just paid $40 million, is not a small detail. It is a public signal that the relationship between Gordon and the coaching staff still has to be rebuilt from scratch, and here's where the pattern gets interesting. While Gordon still has to earn that trust back, Chicago decided to completely overhaul the rest of its secondary. They let Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker walk in free agency and signed former Seahawk Kobe Bryant to a 3-year, $40 million contract. $40 million again. The exact same number as Gordon. Bryant earned that deal with a genuinely elite 2025 season, allowing a completion rate of just 59% 50% and a passer rating of only 54.0 when targeted in his coverage. Those numbers put him among the best safeties in the entire league, and Sports Illustrated already ranked him 10th on their list of the top 26 Bears players for 2026. Now Bryant arrives with two responsibilities at once: being an immediate starter in a brand new position for this organization, and mentoring first-round rookie Dylan Thienman, who arrives with enormous expectations before he has played a single regular season down. Bryant himself said it with genuine humility that he will be there for any question, taking care of his body, taking it 1 week at a time, and that he also needs to be led by others too. Look, here's the pattern I want to name directly, no dancing around it. Ryan Poles has committed $80 million combined dollars to two secondary players across 2 straight off seasons, and one of those 2 players still has not shown in practice that he can stay healthy enough to justify that investment. That is not necessarily a mistake. Gordon's numbers when healthy are genuinely good: 45 career games, 214 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 17 passes defended, and 5 interceptions. Talent was never the question. Availability was. And honestly, this exact pattern has burned me before watching other teams around the league hand out big contracts to players with soft tissue injury histories only to regret it 18 months later. I could be wrong, and I hope I am, because Gordon's ceiling when he is on the field is real. My conditional prediction is this: if Gordon comes into the first full weeks of training camp healthy and stays there through preseason, this whole story changes from the ground up, and Chicago has on paper one of the best young secondaries in the conference. But if he goes down again, even with something minor, Chicago enters the regular season with a $40 million hole at the slot position, right after just investing another $40 million into the rest of the group. That is the real risk here, and nobody is saying it out loud yet. And there you have it, fam. 3 stories that, if you connect them, show you exactly where this organization stands in July of 2026. A front office that correctly identifies its problems but hesitates to solve them decisively. A receiver room that finally has real healthy competition after years without it. And a secondary that placed a big bet, twice, without yet knowing if the first bet can even play 16 straight games. This season can be special. Caleb Williams keeps growing, Ben Johnson has already shown he can design an elite offense, and there are young pieces everywhere with real ceilings. But the margin between a good team and a Super Bowl team almost always comes down to the details we just broke down today. Does Poles have the nerve to close an edge rush trade before it is too late? Who wins the War 1 battle? And can Kyler Gordon simply play 16 straight games for the first time in his career? Bear down, always. If this video gave you something to think about, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, of these 3 bets, which one scares you the most? The trade with the Chiefs, the War 1 war, or Kyler Gordon's health? I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.